You know that sound when a circuit breaker trips? That sharp metallic snap that cuts through all the background noise in a building. When it happens right next to you while you're checking voltage readings, it's not just maintenance. It means something's about to go very wrong. Hey, maintenance guy. The voice came from behind me, loud and demanding. I didn't look up right away. I was staring at my multimeter, showing 487 volts on the main feed. Within spec, but running hot, the 480-volt transformer was humming at a frequency that told me the cooling fans needed attention soon. Look, I've been doing this work for 25 years. I know when equipment is about to fail, and I know when people are about to make stupid mistakes. This was both. My name's Gerald Hoffman. I'm 49, and I keep the lights on in commercial buildings. What I'm definitely not is some maintenance guy waiting for orders from kids in expensive clothes. Old timer, I'm talking to you. The voice got closer, more irritated. I finally turned around, Brendan Walsh, of course. 26 years old, Director of Innovation Strategy. His daddy, Patrick, was Senior VP Operations at the parent company. Brendan wore designer jeans that cost more than my work boots and had probably never touched a wrench in his life. I kept my voice level. I'm running diagnostics on the electrical panel. What do you need? The Wi-Fi is lagging. He gestured wildly at the glass conference room where 5 other guys in identical fleece vests were staring at frozen laptop screens. We're pitching Series B investors in 3 minutes. Fix it. Now, I looked at him. Then at the electrical panel controlling power to his server room. I'm not IT, son. I'm electrical engineering. Submit a ticket to tech support. Brendan laughed. Ugly sound. Listen, Grandpa. My dad owns this building. You work for us. I don't care what your job description says. The internet is broken and you're gonna fix it. Here's the thing about entitled kids. They think authority comes from daddy's money. They don't understand that real power comes from knowing which switches to flip. I set down my multimeter. I'm busy doing actual work. Critical infrastructure doesn't wait for your PowerPoint. Wrong thing to say, or maybe the perfect thing. Brendan's face went red. You know what? I'm sick of the attitude from deadweight employees in this building. You're obsolete. Actually obsolete. He pointed toward the door. You're fired. Get out. I don't want to see you on this floor again. The entire office went quiet. Marketing team stopped typing. Developers looked up from their screens. Even the coffee machine seemed to pause. I stared at him, not shocked, just fascinated. He was firing me. Actually thought he had the authority to fire me. This kid who needed daddy's connections to get a job was firing the man who controlled every amp of electricity flowing into his startup. You're firing me? I asked, just to get it on record. I'm firing you, Grandpa. Pack your tools and get out. Now I stood up slowly. I'm 6'2" and built like someone who spent decades working with heavy equipment. Brendan suddenly looked very small. I didn't argue, didn't explain that I wasn't an employee of Neotech Dynamics, but the independent contractor who held the master electrical service agreement for the entire Skyline Tower. I simply closed my toolbox. Understood, I said. Good luck with your pitch, Brendan. I walked to the elevator with 60 pairs of eyes on my back. Didn't rush. As the doors closed, I saw Brendan high-fiving one of his buddies, thinking he'd just shown everyone who was boss. He hadn't shown dominance. He'd just cut the main power line to his own business, just didn't know it yet. The elevator ride down was smooth. I stepped out and nodded to Clarence, the security supervisor monitoring the camera feeds. Afternoon, Mr. Hoffman. Clarence grunted. Everything good on 37? Not for long, Clarence. Not for long. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in my real office, not on the 37th floor with glass walls and city views. My office was on the 4th floor, behind the mechanical rooms where the actual work happens. It had a view of backup generators and massive cooling towers that kept this building alive. This was the brain of the building. Those fancy suites upstairs were just decoration. I sat at my workstation and pulled up the building management software. My access level was root administrator. I opened the Neotech Dynamics service file, 3 inches thick in the physical binder, but the digital version was what mattered now. Brendan had been very clear. He didn't want me there, didn't want my services. As a professional, I was obligated to respect his wishes. Step 1. Uninterruptible power supply priority. Neotech paid premium rates for dedicated UPS backup to their server room. When main power flickered, their system stayed online while everyone else rebooted. I found the service clause and changed the status to terminated by client request. Now their servers would be just as vulnerable as the call center on the 8th floor. Step 2, HVAC chiller priority. Base building stayed at 72 degrees, but server farms generate massive heat. They needed dedicated cooling or the equipment would cook itself. I pulled up the mechanical system schematic and found the chilled water loop serving suite 3700, currently set to high priority. I typed new command, standard building service only. The cooling system would take about an hour to adjust. By tomorrow morning, their server room would be running at 85 degrees. Step 3, elevator priority access. Neotech had VIP lift service. When their keycards swiped in the lobby, one of the 6 elevators immediately came to them, shaved 4 minutes off their commute. I revoked the authorization code. Now they'd wait in line like everyone else. Wasn't breaking any laws, just removing the premium services they'd explicitly rejected by firing their provider. My phone rang. Stanley, the building operations manager. Jerry, Stanley's voice was tight. I just got a call from the 37th floor. They're saying you got fired? Terminated. Yes, publicly, with witnesses. Jesus. Stanley sighed. What are you doing? Following standard procedure. No signed contract, no liability coverage. Can't provide services without proper authorization. How bad is it going to get? I looked at my monitor. I was hovering over the magnetic lock controls for their suite doors. Well, I hope they brought their building keys. The beauty of building systems is their invisibility. When they work, you don't notice them. You swipe a card, door opens. Flip a switch, lights come on. Breathe, the air is cool. You assume these are natural laws, not services someone provides. On the 37th floor, the laws of physics were changing. Started small. Around 3:30, their smart glass conference room windows stopped responding to privacy commands. They reverted to clear. Brendan was in the middle of screaming at his logistics coordinator when suddenly the entire office could see him pacing and gesticulating like a mime in a glass box. Then came the magnetic locks. The doors separating their executive wing from the developer area were secured by card readers that routed through my server. I disabled the accounts. The doors didn't lock permanently. That would be a fire hazard. Instead, they failed open and refused to latch. Suddenly, the exclusive executive area was open to everyone. Junior interns wandered in looking confused. The noise from the sales floor flooded into Brendan's sanctuary, but the real panic set in at 4:15. I had a dashboard monitoring all building alerts. Ticket 942. Server room temperature rising. Current temp 78 free hat say hebti air ticket. Ticket 943. Elevator access denied. Cards not working. Ticket 944. UPS system offline. Unexpected power interruption. Brendan had called me a maintenance guy. Didn't understand what actually kept his business running. The dedicated power feeds, the climate control, the priority services, they were all mine. Without my authorization codes, his million-dollar infrastructure was just expensive space heaters. I sat back and watched the temperature gauge for suite 300-700 climb. 79 degrees, 80 degrees, 82 degrees. My email pinged from Brendan. Subject, URgent building issues. Hey, the AC is broken and the elevators are glitching. Need this fixed ASAP for investor meeting. Thanks. No apology, no acknowledgement that he'd fired me, just a demand. Still thought I was building maintenance. I didn't reply, archived the email in a folder labeled unauthorized service request. 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. Stanley. Jerry, he's down in the lobby screaming at Clarence. Says the building is attacking him. The building is functioning normally. His premium services were discontinued per his request. He wants to know where you went. Tell him I was terminated and I'm no longer authorized on the premises. He's threatening to call his father good. Maybe his dad can explain the difference between building ownership and service contracts. 84 degrees in the server room. The safety protocols kicked in. The servers began throttling their CPU speeds to prevent overheating. That Series B pitch deck they were uploading, now crawling at dial-up speeds. While Brendan was sweating through his designer clothes upstairs, I was having a beer with Irving Wolf at the VFW hall down the street. Irving ran TechFlow Dynamics, Neotech's biggest competitor. His company had been trying to get space in Skyline Tower for 2 years, but Brendan's father had outbid them for the premium 37th floor. Jerry, Irving said, setting down his beer. He was a good guy, former Navy, built his company from nothing. Didn't expect to hear from you on a weeknight. Things change fast in this business. I slid a folder across the table. High priority infrastructure capacity just became available. Dedicated power feeds, priority cooling, VIP elevator access. Irving raised an eyebrow. I thought Neotech had that locked up for 5 years. Contract was terminated this afternoon. Client representative dismissed the service provider. Irving stared at me, smart enough not to ask for gossip. He saw opportunity. How much capacity? Enough to run your new AI division. Since the physical infrastructure is already in place, I can reroute everything to your 12th floor suite in about 10 minutes. What's the cost? Standard commercial rate, plus expedited installation fee. 3-year minimum, Irving smiled. The smile of a businessman who just found a diamond in the coal pile. Jerry, if you can get me that bandwidth by tomorrow morning, I'll sign tonight. We spend an hour going over technical specs. Irving didn't snap his fingers. Didn't call me names. asked intelligent questions about load capacity and redundancy protocols, treated me like what I was the guy who controlled the invisible infrastructure that made modern business possible. As we shook hands on the deal, my phone buzzed. Building alert, tenant 3700 attempting unauthorized access to electrical panel. Brendan was getting desperate. Probably trying to reset breakers, thinking it was a blown fuse. Everything okay? Irving asked, seeing me check my phone, just a minor glitch in the old system. By the way, you have any equipment waiting to move in? Actually, we've got server racks sitting in a warehouse, been waiting months for installation clearance. Bring them tomorrow. I'll have the freight elevator reserved. Next morning, Friday, the corporate machinery finally woke up. I was in my office at 7 a.m. when the phone started ringing. First call was from Patrick Walsh, Brendan's father. His voice was strained, but trying to stay professional. Mr. Hoffman, I understand there's been a misunderstanding with my son. No misunderstanding, Mr. Walsh. Your son terminated our service agreement. Very publicly. Look, Brendan is young. He was stressed about the investor meeting. We apologize, apology noted. However, the infrastructure capacity has been reallocated. Silence. Reallocated, TechFlow Dynamics signed a 3-year agreement last night. They're moving equipment in this morning. You sold our capacity to our competitor. I sold available capacity to a qualified client. You didn't have a contract. We need that bandwidth back. We'll pay double. I'm afraid it's not available. The new agreement includes exclusivity clauses. Patrick's voice dropped an octave. Mr. Hoffman, we're bleeding money every hour. What do we need to do? Standard building services are still available. Phone lines, basic electrical, standard HVAC ACE. We can't run our platform on standard services. Then I suggest you relocate. The second call was from Neotech's legal counsel, demanding breach of contract damages. I referred them to my liability insurance, which specifically excluded coverage for service terminations initiated by the client. The third call was Irving Wolf, confirming his server installation was on schedule. Right on time, I said, watching the building cameras as TechFlow's equipment truck pulled up to the loading dock. Freight elevator is reserved. Power feeds are ready. Cooling is already adjusted for your load requirements. By noon Friday, it was over. Neotech's servers had overheated and shut down automatically. Their key cards stopped working when the 72-hour security rotation failed to authenticate. Half their staff was locked out of the building, but here's where it got interesting. See, most people don't understand how building automation really works. They think it's all connected, like some master control room where you flip switches. Reality is messier. The security system runs on a separate network from HVAC. The elevators have their own controllers. The fire safety systems are completely independent. They have to be by law. But they all route through junction boxes and server rooms that I designed and installed. So when the UPS units started failing, it wasn't just about air conditioning. The badge readers couldn't authenticate. The smart lighting defaulted to energy save mode. The conference room booking system went offline. Suddenly, Neotech employees were standing in dark hallways, swiping cards that didn't work, trying to get into meeting rooms they couldn't reserve. I got a text from Clarence, "Kid's back in the lobby, looks like he slept in his car." I walked down to see for myself. Brendan was there, wrinkled clothes, hair a mess, trying to argue with Clarence about building access. "This is sabotage," he was shouting. "This is illegal." Clarence stepped between us when he saw me checking the electrical panels. "Sir, you need to calm down. He's destroying our company." Brendan pointed at me with a shaking finger. I looked at him calmly. "I'm just the electrician, son. I keep the lights on for people who pay their bills. You can't do this. My father will sue you. Your father already called." We discussed the contract terms. Brendan's face went white. "What contract terms?" "The ones you terminated when you fired me. Standard commercial building services don't include dedicated cooling for high-density server farms." That was an addendum. "What does that mean?" "It means your computers are cooking themselves. You want to know what's really satisfying. It wasn't watching Brendan panic. It was watching the natural consequences of his arrogance play out exactly like physics predicted they would. Heat rises. Servers generate heat. Without proper cooling, they throttle performance to prevent damage. Without redundant power, they reboot randomly. Without priority network access, they compete with every other tenant for bandwidth. Neotech's million-dollar infrastructure was reverting to the performance level of a coffee shop Wi-Fi. Over the weekend, things got worse. The building runs skeleton crews on Saturday and Sunday. If something goes wrong, there's minimal support. I wasn't there, of course. I was at home working in my garden, reading about new electrical codes, but the automated systems kept sending me alerts. Saturday afternoon. Multiple UPS failures, building section 37. Saturday evening, HVAC system offline for maintenance request. Sunday morning, Security badge authentication server unreachable. Monday morning was the finale. The 72-hour card rotation cycle completed overnight. Every Neotech employee's access card expired simultaneously because the server that renewed them was offline. 30 employees stood at the lobby turnstiles, swiping dead cards, getting red lights and error beeps. "What's going on?" one of the developers yelled at Clarence. "My badge isn't working. System says expired," Clarence grunted, tapping his screen. "Can't let you up without a valid badge." That's when I walked through the lobby. I was wearing a clean button-down shirt, carrying fresh coffee, and feeling pretty good about life. I tapped my master access card at the turnstile. Beep, green light. "Walked right through you." Brendan lunged over the velvet rope barrier. Clarence's massive arm stopped him. "Back up, sir," Clarence warned. "She's doing this." Brendan screamed. "She locked us out." I stopped and turned. The lobby was crowded. People from other companies were watching the show. "I didn't lock you out, Brendan. Your security protocol requires network authentication to validate credentials. You don't have a network, therefore you don't have valid credentials. Fix it. I have a meeting at 9 a.m. with the tenant representatives." "Are you the representative?" "Because from where I'm standing, you look like a trespasser." I turned to the elevator. "Fourth floor," I said to the voice command. The doors slid shut, cutting off the sight of Brendan trying to explain to his own employees why they couldn't go to work. Upstairs, the 37th floor was dark, hot, and silent. The servers had engaged their thermal shutdown protection. The lights were off because the motion sensors hadn't received a keep-a-leave ping from the network. It was a ghost town. At exactly 9 a.m., the conference room door opened. Stanley walked in first, looking relieved I was handling the situation. Then came Alan Sterling, Neotech's lawyer, looking exhausted. Then Patrick Walsh, Brendan's father. He was a short man, bald, with eyes like flint. He wore a suit that cost more than my annual salary. Finally, Brendan trailed in. He looked like a beaten dog, but still had that entitled smirk lurking behind his eyes. They sat on one side of the table. I sat on the other. "Alone, Mr. Hoffman," Patrick Walsh started. His voice was gravel and exhaustion. "Let's cut the crap. We're losing $8,000 an hour. My son made a mistake. He thought you were support staff. He was stressed. We apologize." He nudged Brendan. Brendan looked at the table. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "I shouldn't have fired you. Can we just turn the power back on now?" I looked at Brendan, then at Patrick. "Mr. Walsh, your son didn't just mistake me. He publicly humiliated the person responsible for keeping your business operational. But that's personal. I can get over personal. The problem is strictly professional." I opened my folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "This is the infrastructure renewal contract." Patrick reached for it. "Fine. We'll sign it. Same terms?" "No." I pulled the paper back slightly. "This is the voided contract. Excuse me?" Alan Sterling, the lawyer, leaned forward. As of Friday evening, the bandwidth allocation previously reserved for Neotech Dynamics was released to the open market. It has been purchased. Purchased? Patrick's eyes widened. "By whom?" "TechFlow Dynamics." Patrick slammed his hand on the table. "TechFlow? The guys across the street? You sold our fiber to our competitors." "I sold my fiber to a paying client with a signed contract." "You didn't have a contract, Patrick. You had a handshake and a renewal that your representative threw in my face." "Undo it." Patrick commanded. "Cancel their deal. Give it back to us. We'll pay double." "Can't do it. It's a 3-year binding agreement. Penalties for breach are astronomical. Besides, they're already using it. Their traffic is live." "So what are you saying?" Brendan piped up, his voice cracking. "We just don't have internet. You have the base building internet. DSL speeds, good for email, bad for whatever it is you do. Innovation strategy, I believe. We can't run the platform on DSL," Brendan shouted. "Then I suggest you relocate, because this building can no longer support your needs." Patrick Walsh stared at me, looked at his son, looked at the lawyer. He finally realized the magnitude of the screw-up. "You're evicting us," Patrick whispered. "Without serving notice, you're starving us out." "I'm just the landlord, Patrick. I provide the walls and the electricity. What you do inside them is up to you. But if you want cooling, redundant power, and high-speed data, you need a partner in infrastructure. And you fired yours." I walked to the door. "Oh, and Brendan, the freight elevator is booked today. TechFlow is moving in their new server racks. You'll have to wait until Wednesday to move your things out. I'd suggest using the stairs. The move out was painful to watch, which is why I watched every second on the security monitors." Wednesday morning, the Neotech team began their strategic relocation. That's corporate speak for running away in shame. Since I'd blocked the freight elevator for emergency maintenance, found a loose bolt. Very dangerous. They had to use the service elevator. It was small. They had to dismantle their server racks piece by piece. Brendan wasn't there. I heard through Stanley that Patrick Walsh had reassigned his son. Brendan was now director of special projects at a satellite office in Kansas City, Missouri. I checked the specs for that office. It's a warehouse district. The internet there is copper wire. Good luck with that. TechFlow moved into the 37th floor 2 months later. Neotech broke their lease, paying a $1 penalty that went straight into the building owners' pockets. The owners gave me a nice bonus for aggressive yield management. TechFlow is a great tenant. They submit tickets properly. They say please and thank you. They bring donuts to the security guards. I was sitting in the 37th floor conference room again 6 months later. Irving, the TechFlow CEO, was signing off on a request for additional power capacity. You know, Jerry, Irving said, looking out at the skyline, I still can't believe they just walked away from a setup like this. Why would anyone walk away? I took a sip of my coffee. Poor management. They didn't understand the foundation. Well, we're happy to be here, by the way. My nephew is starting an internship next week. He's a bit of a hotshot. Thinks he knows everything about computers. I looked up from checking my voltage meter. I told him, Irving continued, that the first person he introduces himself to is Jerry Hoffman. Told him that if he ever disrespects the guy who keeps the lights on, I'll throw him out myself. I smiled and went back to my readings. He'll be fine, Irving. As long as he knows who controls the breakers. Everything was running exactly where it was supposed to be. The building hummed around me, alive and stable. My meters showed green across the board. 6 months after that, I got promoted to Regional Infrastructure Director with a $75,000 bonus. Patrick Walsh sent me a formal letter of apology and a consultation retainer for their new location. Somewhere in Kansas City, Brendan was probably still waiting for a PDF to load. Sometimes justice doesn't come from a courthouse. Sometimes it comes from understanding that in the modern world, respect flows just like electricity, and both can be shut off by the guy who really knows how things work. Look, if you're watching this and you're in management, here's what I want you to remember. The people keeping your world running aren't invisible. The guy checking the electrical panels, the woman monitoring your network, the technician maintaining your HVAC, they're not just support staff. They're the reason you can do business at all. Treat them like disposable help, and you might find out just how disposable your business really is. Respect comes in many forms, but it always flows both ways. And in a world built on systems most people don't understand, the person who does understand them holds more power than any org chart will ever show you. Don't fire the electrician, especially when he's the one keeping your world lit up.